All right, so let's get into this. I'm going to quickly, in this part of the series, I'm going to just create the model and then create the skeleton that we're going to use to rig that model with. And this is going to be as basic and as straightforward as it can be. Let's jump into this. I'm going to create a sphere. All right, so drop a sphere. Great. I need to help in order to indicate what way this model is facing. I'm going to create a torus that I'm going to, let's say, let's rotate this guy 90 on the X. Yep. And then I'm going to shrink that guy down a bit. Okay. And then I'm going to transform this guy out a bit so that we can see, you know, kind of where on this. That's basically an eyeball. Okay. This is just to indicate where this thing is facing. Okay. All right. So now let's do that. I merge that together. And then I'm going to create the first joint actually. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to extract a centroid. I'm going to change this to detail. And then you'll notice I've got a little tiny dot right there. Okay. And I'm going to name that guy just by dropping a name node. And I'm going to use the $OS mechanism. This is basically Houdini. If you're not familiar with this is Houdini's way of saying, hey, whatever value you put into the name of the actual node, use that as the field value here. Okay. And so I'm going to call this the Deform joint. And this is going to be the actual joint that will bind to the actual mesh we've just built. Oh, one other thing, I forgot one other thing here, because if you view this, notice it's sitting about in the middle of the graph. I want that to the bottom of that to sit right on the top of the surface. So I'm going to say min, okay? And so now that guy is sitting on the ground. That's exactly what we want. Okay, great. So that's the mesh we're going to use. And this is our first deform. This is our first joint that we're going to bind to that mesh. And why don't we just do that now? So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to create another name because I want to just name the mesh. It's super simple. I'm just going to call it mesh. Okay. And once I do that, I'm going to then pack this. And the reason I'm going to pack this is because I want to use the capture pack geometry node next. And so I'm going to pack this. I'm going to pack it by the name attribute that we just did. And then I'm going to say capture packed geometry. I'm going to put that guy in there. And then I'm going to take this joint. But before I do, I need to do one other extra thing, which is give it some default transforms on it by dropping the rig doctor and initialize that transform and then push that into the capture packed geo node. Okay. Now, what I want to do here is add the, first off, I want to make sure that I click the unpack output because part of what Apex requires is a packed folder mechanism. And I don't want to pack a geometry that's already packed. So I'm going to make sure it's unpacked. And then I'm going to say capture all the geo and use the point 0. Why is it saying 0.0? Dun, dun, dun. Deform. Because I didn't say primitive. Okay, so see how I named this? I named the primitive. I want to name the point. Okay. So now when I go down to the capture geometry, I'll come down here and say select deform. Okay. I have done that to myself a million times. I'm kind of glad I did that on video so you can kind of see what happens there. Okay. So now that captured geo, I'm going to turn off my visualization. I actually had a visualizer for the name, basically of a marker set to the name attribute so you can see the names of the points. So if I come back over here, for instance, and I turn that visualizer on, you see the name deform. That becomes quite useful later on. Okay. All right. But I'm going to turn that off for now. I'm going to select this. All right. So now actually we're actually rigged. We've essentially weight painted this mesh onto that joint. And how do we know that? I can drop a bone deform, and this is basically how things are done prior to Apex. And I'm going to drop actually, let me drop this here and drop this skeleton in here, drop a rig pose node and attach here. And now if I hit enter in the viewport, I've got my deform node. And if I select that guy, I can move this around. I can rotate it, do what have you, okay? So this mesh is now completely bound, weight painted, if you will, to that one bone, okay? And I'm just gonna remove these now. Those are not required. Okay, so that's our mesh. And in fact, I'm just gonna say, let's do a null here to basically just say out mesh. I'm gonna call it geo, my out geo, all right? Now, this right here is all that is required for our skeleton. Literally, as far as Apex is concerned, that's our skeleton, that's our base skeleton. So I'm gonna call this out skeleton, all right? But now what I'm gonna do is I wanna create a couple control points, basically some points or bones that I'm gonna actually use to control this rig when we do get into the squatch and stretch. And the way that I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna create a blast node here, because what I wanna do is I wanna select just the top point. And that's gonna be my top point, except I'm gonna say delete non-selected, okay? And now I'm gonna turn that thing back on, and I'm gonna grab this deform, drop this in, and name this top. See, now I've got the top point, okay? I'm gonna do that again, grab both of these, pull this over, except instead of 0, I'm going to grab the bottom and hit enter. And then I'm gonna call this bottom, okay? I'm gonna create one more of these, except I'm not gonna do the blast. I'm actually just gonna copy and paste. I'm using the Alt key here to grab that deform node, and I'm gonna call this root, all right? And so now if I grab all these, hold Alt, drag this out, I get a merge node, and there you see all of my control joints. So I've got my top, the root, and the bottom, all right? Now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna merge the deform. So I'm gonna create one more merge, except I'm gonna do it with this deform, merge these guys. So now you'll see deform in there as well. And I'm going to create a parent joints node, because now I wanna parent all these guys, all right? And if I go over to the rig tree, and if you don't see this rig tree panel, which you most likely won't, because by default it's not here, you can click on this plus sign, go to new pane type, and go down to animation and select rig tree. The reason why this is nice is that when it allows you to easily create hierarchy, because what I want is I want the deform root or joint to be parented to the root, as will the top and bottom, okay? So that's our simple skeleton in all of its glory. And actually what that really is, as far as Apex is concerned, is that is going to be my guides. So I'm going to call this my out guides, which are just like control points, okay? All right, and that is the model creation and the skeleton, all that is necessary to get this going. And so the next step here is, let's push this into some Apex rig components.